I'm Dr. Jim Ferrel. I wanted to introduce myself, have you see who I am, meet me, and understand where I'm coming from with my book, Neogenesis. I've been a practitioner of the medicine field for over 35 years, and I'm very concerned about the direction of the health of our species. In Chapter 1, I relate a disease profile change. I try to bring it to you in very honest terms, this dramatic profile change that we've experienced as a species. In Chapter 2, I try to explain to you how difficult it is to try to give you cause and effect answers as to why this disease profile change has occurred. And I conclude in opine that this change is related to the change that we have in our environment. Given the two options, either genetics or environment as the cause, we have to pretty much eliminate genetics because classical genetics does not cause such dramatic profile changes. So if it isn't genetics, it has to be the environment. And now we're faced with the question of how does this work? How does the environment actually influence the health of our species? To fully understand it, we have to start talking now about Chapter 3 and understand the detoxification system. It's a very complex system, so I try to present it in abstraction with something that's familiar to us all, and that is the kitchen sink. What we're going to do in this abstraction is to show you how the detoxification system works. Because the detoxification system is very complex, and it doesn't have an anatomical correlate like all of the other conventional systems of studying the human body has, we're going to try to make this abstraction, which is just a simpler way of thinking about a very complex thing, into an understandable concept by comparing it to something we're familiar with. In this case, we're talking about the kitchen sink. In both sinks, that is the kitchen sink and our detoxification sink, we are cleaning things. In the case of the kitchen sink, we're cleaning dishes. These are conventional dishes. We stick them on the left side of the sink. We wash them. We use water to wash them. We use detergent to wash them. We use scrubbing materials and tools to get the dirt off. Then we put these clean dishes on the right hand side of the sink where we let them dry. In our detoxification system for our body, we have different dishes. The dishes are really things that make us up. And these things that make up who we are includes the fluids and organelles within the cells within the tissues within the organs, and the organs within this total body of who we are. These are the dishes. We can see that we can pull these dishes out. This is the guts, for example. Stomach's in here, liver, lungs. All of these dishes need to be cleaned, but the most important dish to keep clean, this is a good bowl, is this one, and that is the brain. What happened to part of it? Oh, it's okay. It's all there. This dish is particularly important in that it is the command and control center of everything else that we are. In fact, it's who we are that resides right in this part of the brain. We make all choices directed by virtue of this organ. And unless this dish is kept very, very clean, we're going to see changes in the body. when this gets sick, it reflects in somatic changes in the entire body. So it's very confusing, but it helps explain what we're talking about in the disease profile change we described in Chapter 1. And it is, in fact, an explanation of the connecting of the dots that occurs that we talk about in Chapter 2. So we will understand as we proceed how it all relates to our detoxification system. Now I want to talk about the faucet in our detoxification system, because the faucet, like a typical kitchen faucet, has a control that allows for both cold and hot water. In our abstraction, we're talking about the cold water, including all of the good things that help our detoxification system work. This cold water would include micronutrients, cofactors that help the enzymes that are going to be the main cleaning agents in this sink work, minerals, antioxidants, all of these good things that assist in the efficiency of the sink are the cold water. The hot water are all the toxins that we take into our body. Now the main source of the exogenous toxins are the ones that are produced outside of the body relate to this. This is sort of simulating an oil can, and the ingredients in this oil can essentially go into two medias. They go into the air and they go into the water. And we take them into the body via taking in the air we breathe, or the water we drink, or the water that ends up in the food chain somehow, or in cosmetics that we place on our body. And so most of these toxins are in fact related to oil and are fat-soluble toxins. Also, hot water, the toxic elements that we take into this sink, come from energies. Our body is able to absorb all kinds of energies. In fact, every form of energy in the universe can be absorbed by the body. And in doing so, these forms, which include the mechanical, the electrical, the chemical, the heat, and the radiation, all change in our body to chemicals. And that's because we are, in fact, just a bag of chemicals. Now, in addition to these exogenous or chemicals and energies that form outside of the body, this hot water also includes endogenous chemicals or waveforms that turn into chemicals, and these are the ones that we produce inside the body. These endogenous chemicals are products of normal metabolism. The main one, as I discuss in my book, is CO2. Carbon dioxide is the main toxin that we generate in metabolism, and it's the same metabolic product that is contaminating the world at this time and causing global warming, of course. Other toxic endogenous chemicals include those mistake chemicals that we make from normal metabolism, free radicals that are part of the package of the ability to generate energy and so forth. And also, in these endogenous chemicals that are toxic include some of those that are related to environmentally induced chemicals. These include allergy-related chemicals such as cytokines related to allergy, either histamine, leukotrienes, bradykinins, and so forth. Also, environmentally induced cytokines, which are basically messengers that tell us that the environment is causing us some trouble and sends messages to various parts of the body to get some kind of response. The third type of endogenous toxic chemicals that come in through this faucet are neurological response produced chemicals, such as those chemicals related to fear, related to pain, related to fatigue, and so forth. They actually turn into chemicals that cause these dishes to become dirty. And of course, still the emphasis in terms of the sink and the emphasis in terms of the book is about this particular dish inside here. It's the brain. What I want to discuss is also, in addition to the toxic chemicals from the environment, that come in here in a chemical form, we also have energies that are toxic that convert in the body to chemicals, of course, because that's what we are, a bag of chemicals. So we can essentially, as that bag of chemicals, take any type of energy that is possible in the universe, and there's only 5 forms. There's the mechanical, electrical, radiation, chemical, and heat. And we take those energy forms and convert them to a chemical, and in many cases these chemicals are toxic. Sometimes these waveform energies are therapeutic, but in many cases they're toxic. For example, we know that the most common cause of cancer is in fact toxic waveform energy, ultraviolet light. When we expose our skin to excess doses of that light, the waveform changes into a chemical called a free radical. It does specific damage to the DNA, and we know exactly how it works in a chemical way to change the DNA, which is also a chemical, and then the reproduction of that perverted DNA forms a cancer, a specific type of cancer. So this is a way an energy can actually be toxic and change to a chemical, and the chemical itself can do a specific damage. But literally we can take any energy form, the 5 that I mentioned, and convert them into chemicals that can be toxic and have to be detoxified in this sink. Now, some of the energies that really affect us in a toxic way are subtle energies. These are energies that are radiation of energies. For example, a smile can affect us in a positive way. A threatening gestalt, or an appearance that we are under threat, may evoke in us a chemical reaction such as fear. And these are all toxic chemicals, and they have to be processed in the sink. So really, what we're talking about in this faucet is very complex, but it all converts to chemicals. And we can think of it in very simplistic terms, if we think of it as chemical toxins. Ultimately, the chemical toxins affect all of these dishes, but the one that we're particularly concerned about, again, is the dish that exists in this skull, the one that's between our ears, this brain, because this dish is extremely important in defining who we are, what we do, how we behave, and how sick the rest of our body becomes. And keeping this dish clean, in fact purified, becomes the goal of the neogenic process strategy. Now I'm going to put these dishes away, these important dishes. I'm going to put them over in the clean side of the sink so I can talk about what our cleaning tools are. Our cleaning tools in the detoxification system are basically enzymes. And the enzymes I've designated here are keys. And of course the keys I've plastered on with super glue that obviously is not 100% perfect. But the key is special in that this key, I'm sure, fits some lock, and the lock is really a bond that joins 2 atoms within a molecule. And in a toxic chemical, we have to have a key to disjoin those 2 atoms so that the toxic chemical can be broken down. So we have various cleaning tools, like our conventional sink has. You have a sponge, a scraper, and so forth. We have very specific type of cleaning tools, and let me show you these cleaning tools. Now you're looking at the main detergent in our sink. These are all keys, of course, and they're in my grandson's little medicine box. And one thing now, if you notice, any key has various features which make it difficult to duplicate. And because of the many features and the variability of these features, it really increases our ability to specify exactly which bond between which atoms is going to be unlocked or locked. In the case of toxic chemicals, each atom is bonded together in such a way that it needs a specific key or enzyme to unlock that lock. Now sometimes we can unlock that lock because we've got the keys on board, sometimes we don't. And I'm going to talk about an original design, because in our original design these keys that we have were designed to open locks, that is bonds, that we were normally exposed to in our environment in this pristine way. These keys open up common locks that we're used to in natural food products. Now, these keys don't exist in a box like this. In the cell they exist on various organelles. And so we'll demonstrate that. We put this box of enzymes in there, and what we've done is we've constructed, with the help of my grandson, some of the cleaning instruments that are involved inside the cell in various organelles inside the cytoplasm or nucleus of the cell. And let me explain first that these organelles or cleaning tools are merely meeting places where all the cool water elements, which include minerals, cofactors, micronutrients, antioxidants, all come together in an exact way so that they can perform the function for which they're designed, and they're designed to open locks. This one we'll call an endoplasmic reticulum. It's like a net. Okay, now let me show you another one. This one is extremely important in breaking up fat-soluble toxins. It's called a peroxisome, and it's a meeting place where all of these enzymes. This one's trying to take a leave of absence, so we'll fire him right away. But these meeting places, called peroxisomes, are places where these enzymes that are related to detoxifying fats gather, and of course all of the helpers that we talked about, the cofactors, the minerals, the antioxidants, become part of this cleaning process, and toxins are broken up relevant to this meeting place in the cell. Now this one we've written some words on there. It's called proteasome. Now proteasomes are kind of interesting because you see this is a kind of an odd shape, number one, but number two, they have very specific function, and proteasomes gather all the enzymes that are related to breaking up the misformed proteins, because in protein synthesis it's sort of an empirical process in which all of these substrates to manufacture the protein are produced, gathered up together. And sometimes the gathering and the organizing of the substrates is good, sometimes it's bad, and in most cases it's bad, so the enzymes that gather around this meeting place, called the proteasome, have to break the chemical down and you reuse the substrates to manufacture new chemicals. Proteins are so complex that even if they're all organized in the exact line, they have to be folded properly, and if they get misfolded, again, this organelle comes along and redoes the mistakes, detoxifies the mistakes. Now, this last one we're going to talk about is called the lysosome, and you probably heard about that one. It's a special type of meeting place or organelle. And you see the enzymes are contained within this particular chamber. And the significance is that in addition to the enzymes that are in here, we have acid. And that's important because if we let acid dominate the interior of the cell and didn't contain it in a special organelle, as it is, called a lysosome, the acid would be detrimental to all other functions of the cell. So the body is so smart as put these enzymes in a special container with the acid so that the toxic chemicals can come into the area, and the enzymes are activated by this high acid content interior, and it breaks down the toxic chemicals that are relevant, and including toxic parts of other organelles that are breaking down in the apoptotic program or cellular death program, including other organelles. So this is an interesting one. All of these cleaning materials as a group involve these keys, and you can imagine, if you will, these cleaning tools are going to be more effective if they're in motion. If these tools are just sitting here in the sink without any motion whatsoever, they really can't do their job as effectively. Once you have motion, you can imagine this thing right here in motion, how good it would be to start interacting with these toxic chemicals when it's in motion. If it's not in motion, then the chemical has to find its way over to the enzyme trap, as it is, and get detoxified. So it's not going to do that. In every study that looks at outcomes for various diseases, when we put exercise or activity or motion into the equation, invariably it shows a benefit, and this is the explanation of that benefit. Motion of these organelles really increase the efficiency of this detoxification sink and help clean the organs. And the most important and effective movement that we can talk about is, in fact, the way we are naturally designed to move, and that's called the reciprocating gait. In this gait, as we put out the left arm, the right leg goes out forward too, and then in reciprocation, we put out the right arm and the left leg goes out. And in this action, this particularly hardwired reciprocating gait activity, this sink is most efficient in moving fluids and functioning best to detoxify. This visceral fat is strongly correlated with what we now term the metabolic syndrome. The metabolic syndrome is classically 4 different parameters or criteria. It includes the lack of the body's sensitivity to insulin. It relates to the apple shape or the waist measurement. It relates to high blood pressure, and it relates to the high fats that we see as risk factors in cardiovascular diseases and other diseases. So it's a very important fundamental part of this disease profile change that we describe in 1. What I state in the book is that this is just an association, this metabolic syndrome, that relates and points to this particular visceral fat. But it's really a bag or a folder in which we take these ideas such as hyperlipidemia, insulin resistance, hypertension, and diabetes, and group them together and say they're relevant to this tissue. Well, what I'm saying is they're relevant to a whole lot of other diseases as well, and I term this bag a much larger bag. The bag is called co-ed syndrome, not metabolic syndrome, but co-ed syndrome, which stands for consequences of economic desires. There's 2 things that are driving this visceral fat. The one thing is, as I pointed out, of this origin. It's the toxic world we live in, full of fat-soluble chemicals that have worked their way into 2 medias. The first media is the water we drink, and the second media is the air we breathe. They get into our body, they come into our sink. Our sink is compromised in its ability to detoxify these, because a lot of these chemicals really have bonds that we can't break. So our body is smart, it doesn't want to overflow and damage the organs, so it sequesters these fat-soluble toxins right in this metabolic fat, this visceral fat, and we see people getting bigger and bigger relevant to this particular visceral fat issue. So this visceral fat is the key element that absorbs the excess fat-soluble toxins from the sink. And if we either increase the flow of toxins into the sink, raising the level to a dangerous level, the body's smart enough to sequester or put these fat-soluble toxins in the fat, or if we're not using the detoxification system efficiently, a lack of exercise, for example, lack of motion, and we're not processing the toxins with inadequate motion, our body adapts by increasing the storage of toxins in this fat. Unfortunately, what happens is this fat can only store it for so long, and like any toxic waste dump, it leaks somewhat. And then what happens, in my opinion, is it interfaces with another system of the body that we call the immune system. And the immune system is basically designed to attack invading organisms. And in this case, it perceives these conglomerates of toxic chemicals that haven't been broken down and just plastered in there as invading organisms. So it goes along and it does its job by circulating reactive immune cells that enter this fat, morph into macrophages, and start trying to destroy these toxic chemicals that it perceives as foreign invaders. This creates an inflammatory process, and you can see here, these actually are little red areas on the fat where we have the immune system responding and reacting to this very toxic fat. Now, in the process of the battle that's going on and raging from the immune system's interaction with these toxic chemicals in this fat, we call inflammation. A lot of embers from this fire that's going on in this fat come over and contaminate our other dishes in the clean side of the sink. And of course, back again to the most important dish, being the brain, we're particularly concerned about that. But what I call this floating of these embers is the stink from the sink. We can't get it down the drain. It actually stinks by bringing embers across over into the clean side of the sink. So that a lot of this disease profile change can be explained in relationship to this very toxic fat and the stink from the sink coming over and contaminating our clean dishes. The other good news that I see is if we understand this, we can understand how to increase the efficiency of the sink and diminish our damage, as it were, and diminish the size of this particular toxic visceral fat. And we can do that in two ways. We can either decrease the amount of toxins we take in through this faucet, and I kind of give examples or information in terms of how to diminish the toxicity that we're bringing into our body in Chapter 7, for example, because Chapter 7 talks about mental mastery, and a lot of the toxic chemicals that we bring into the sink are related to toxic thoughts and not being able to meet and respond in ways that are healthy. We create in our toxic thoughts and our lack of mental mastery chemicals that actually damage the body and increase the toxic load in this sink. I also talk about non-toxic living in a dynamic way, because we're always trying to learn about how to live and bring in less toxins through this faucet. Toxins enter the body, as we mentioned, through the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the cosmetics we put on our body, and all the toxic elements of energy that convert to chemicals and enter the sink. Furthermore, I talk about the highway to hygiene, because if we're not clean in ourselves, we create additional toxins that are relevant to unsanitary conditions. And the last thing that I think we consider in trying to diminish toxins is trying to avoid the traps, because a lot of the traps that are out there, especially in the healthcare industry, really are creating more toxic chemicals and putting them in their sink, whether they're pharmaceuticals that we use inappropriately, or nutraceuticals, or supplements that have a toxic containment. All of these are in fact chemicals that further increase the level of toxic total body load that's in our sink that we have to process. The second way that we can fight against this toxic world, diminish this particular toxic visceral fat, is through motion. We've discussed motion that is so critical. So trying to get more exercise, and beneficial exercise that involves a reciprocating gait, is an excellent way to increase the efficiency of this sink. It will prove it every single time. Optimal fitness is key. Bioenergetics is another way that we can utilize a more efficient function of the sink. And of course, excellent nutrition. The cold water that we bring in, the micronutrients, the proper minerals, are relevant to what we consume as food, and sometimes in the supplement form if we're knowledgeable. But it's always a dynamic process of learning these things. And we will find as we go through this book that I've presented all of these options in terms of diminishing the toxic input through the faucet, or increasing the efficiency of this sink in dynamic terms, because we never know it all. We have to continue learning. We have to learn through our experience in life, and we're gonna learn new things. So that I hope this book is an inspiration for people to understand the basic function of the detoxification system, the basic elements in which we have to improve the function of this particular sink, diminish the toxins that are brought into the body, and use that as a springboard for increasing your wellness. So we've gotten through the very technical part of the detoxification system in abstraction. We made it simple by making the abstraction of a kitchen sink. And we've gotten through the idea that this detoxification sink really determines how effectively we clean this particular dish, which is the brain. And in chapter 4 I really discuss how the brain, which is the command and control center of our being, manifests illness and reflects that illness in all kinds of somatic expressions that are difficult to understand unless you understand the detoxification system and the toxic brain. And that takes us to chapter 5, which is basically how we regenerate, how our design functions in taking us along this journey. Cells are worn out essentially and have to be replaced at all times, and each line replaces at a different rate. And the aggregate of all of these replacement rates are all well programmed in the DNA, this gift of design that we're inherited as a part of our species. And after I discuss that in 5, I then take you to chapter 6, which is really a tool called SEEK that is an acronym I made up and that my grandson plastered on my fist over here. It's called SEEK, and the SEEK stands for safe, effective, easy, and kind. And in chapter 6 I try to give examples of how important this tool that I liken to a flashlight to illuminate choices in our lives, is so important to include all aspects of this safe, effective, and easy, kind part of the decisions we make. And then I try to take each of the important dynamic issues of choices that relate to the health and break them apart and dissect them and give examples and try to, by example, inspire you to make your own cookbook. Use your own moral compass and your own brilliance that you have as special gifts to take these and expand them and create yourself the way you wish to create yourself. So that's chapter 7 through 13, the various dynamic principles. They're part of our wellness strategy. And then I wrap it up with chapter 14 that has absolutely nothing to do with wellness, but it just gives you an idea of the way I perceive the importance of interrelationships and how important they are and how they translate to disease, and really try to end it in a positive note, because this is truly a gift, this Neogenesis, and it is truly something that we can look forward to in planning a wellness strategy. So I hope you seek it, this gift. Seek good health, my friend.